Karen Whitmore stood at her kitchen window, watching the Henderson family's golden retriever defecate directly onto her prize-winning petunias. Again, the measuring cup in her hand, the one she'd been using to portion out exactly 2.3 ounces of pool chlorine per HOA Regulation 47B, cracked under her grip. At that exact moment, Mrs. Chen from Unit 14 walked past Karen's front door wearing a gasped cherry red bikini to the community pool. Karen's HOA handbook clearly stated modest earth tones only for swimwear. But the final straw came when she spotted teenage Tommy Martinez attempting to sneak his friends through the back gate. Friends who definitely weren't on the pre-approved guest list she'd personally typed and laminated. "Not on my watch," Karen muttered, abandoning her chlorine duties and marching toward her emergency supplies closet. 20 minutes later, Karen emerged from her townhouse like a woman possessed, dragging a landscaping boulder the size of a small refrigerator. Her perfectly styled blunt bob had already begun to fray in the humidity, but her determination remained ironclad. She'd purchased this particular granite specimen for $847, specifically for perimeter enforcement situations, though she'd never imagined she'd need to deploy it on a Tuesday. "Karen, what in God's name are you doing?" called her neighbor Dave, who was grilling burgers on his apparently non-regulation deck. "Protecting property values," she panted, positioning the boulder strategically at the pool gate's entrance. "Someone has to maintain standards around here." The Willowbrook Commons community pool was in full swing when Karen arrived with her geological ammunition. Children splashed in the shallow end while parents lounged on chairs that, Karen noted with growing irritation, were arranged in a completely haphazard pattern. The sight of Mrs. Chen's forbidden red bikini glinting in the sunlight made Karen's left eye twitch. "Attention, residents," Karen announced, standing atop her boulder like some deranged poolside dictator. "I'm implementing Emergency Protocol Delta 7. "There is no Emergency Protocol Delta 7, Karen," sighed Jim Patterson, the actual HOA treasurer, looking up from his crossword puzzle. "There is now." Karen produced her laminated copy of the community guidelines, waving it like a battle flag. "Mrs. Chen, your swimwear is in direct violation of Section 12, subsection C, Tommy Martinez. Your guests require 48 hours advance notification and background checks." The pool fell silent, except for the gentle hum of the filtration system and one small child's confused whimpering. "You've lost your damn mind," muttered Bill Henderson, the dog owner whose pet had started this entire cascade of events. That's when Karen made her first critical error. Instead of simply citing violations and retreating to her townhouse to draft strongly worded letters, she decided to take direct action. She hefted a pool skimmer like a medieval weapon and began her march toward Mrs. Chen. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to change into appropriate attire immediately, or face a $200 fine, per HOA regulation." Mrs. Chen, a retired military nurse who had survived 3 deployments and countless entitled patients, slowly removed her sunglasses. "Karen, I've had it up to here with your nonsense. This bikini cost me $60, it's perfectly modest, and your little rule book doesn't supersede basic human decency." The confrontation escalated quickly. Karen attempted to confiscate Mrs. Chen's pool float, a flamingo she deemed too festive for community standards. Mrs. Chen refused to surrender it. Other residents began taking sides, with Team Karen consisting of exactly one person, herself, and Team Common Sense comprising literally everyone else. In the chaos that followed, Karen made her second critical error. She tried to use the pool skimmer to snag the flamingo float while Mrs. Chen was still on it. The physics worked exactly as expected. Mrs. Chen tumbled into the water with a tremendous splash, her non-compliant red bikini perfectly visible beneath the chlorinated surface. But Karen's victory was short-lived. The skimmer pole, now freed from Mrs. Chen's weight, snapped back like a catapult and sent Karen herself flying backward off her boulder throne. She landed with a bone-jarring thud on the concrete deck, her laminated rulebook scattering across the wet surface like oversized confetti. The assembled crowd fell silent, unsure whether to laugh, applaud, or call 911. Karen marched back to her townhouse, slammed the door, and began making phone calls. First to the city planning department, then to the health inspector, then to the fire marshal, the noise complaint hotline, and finally, in a stroke of either genius or complete insanity, to Channel 7's consumer protection reporter. Hello, this is Karen Whitmore from Willowbrook Commons, and I have a story about systematic HOA violations and community safety hazards that your viewers need to hear about. By noon, Karen had transformed her living room into a war room, complete with printed emails, highlighted ordinances, and a detailed timeline of every single violation she'd documented over the past 48 hours. Her phone rang constantly with callbacks from various city departments, and she could see news van pulling into the community parking lot through her window. The doorbell rang. Karen opened it to find Mrs. Chen, now wearing a perfectly regulation beige swimsuit, flanked by Jim Patterson and 3 other HOA board members. "We need to talk," Mrs. Chen said simply. Karen invited them in, gesturing proudly toward her documentation fortress. "I assume you're here to apologize and discuss implementing proper enforcement protocols." "Actually," Jim Patterson said carefully, "we're here because the HOA board held an emergency meeting this morning. Karen, we're removing you from your position as compliance coordinator." The words hit Karen like a physical blow. Her coffee mug slipped from her hands, shattering on the hardwood floor she'd spent 3 hours cleaning that morning. "You can't do that," she whispered. "I'm the only one who actually cares about maintaining standards. Without proper enforcement, this place will turn into a community where people can enjoy their homes without being harassed." Mrs. Chen finished quietly. "Karen, we appreciate your dedication, but this has gone too far." Karen looked around at their faces, some sympathetic, others clearly relieved, and realized that everything she'd worked for was collapsing. But instead of begging or arguing, she straightened her shoulders and smiled. "Fine," she said, her voice eerily calm. "But I want you to remember this conversation when property values start declining. When the community standards disappear. When Willowbrook Commons becomes just another mediocre neighborhood instead of the premier residential community it was meant to be." After they left, Karen sat alone in her war room, surrounded by her carefully organized evidence of everyone else's failures. Outside her window, she could see the news reporter interviewing residents, probably getting their side of the story. She picked up her phone and scrolled through her contacts until she found the number she was looking for. Henderson Properties, the development company that had originally built Willowbrook Commons. Time for a different approach entirely. "Hello, this is Karen Whitmore. I'd like to speak with someone about purchasing additional properties in Willowbrook Commons. I have some very interesting ideas about community improvement." As she waited on hold, Karen gazed out at the pool where this had all started. Tomorrow would bring new strategies, new battles, and new opportunities to restore order to her little corner of the world. After all, if you can't beat them from the inside, there are always other ways to win. Karen lay there for a moment, staring at the cloudless sky, her designer pool cover-up soaked with chlorinated water, and her authority utterly decimated. But instead of embarrassment or regret, she felt something else entirely, a strange electric thrill. For the first time in her 15-year HOA career, someone had actually fought back. And Karen Whitmore, despite her current horizontal position, was already planning her counterattack. "This isn't over," she announced to no one in particular, struggling to her feet with as much dignity as a soaking wet woman surrounded by scattered laminated papers could muster. She was absolutely right. It wasn't over. It was just getting started. Word of Karen's Boulder incident spread through Willowbrook Commons faster than pool chemicals dissolve in hot water. By evening, her phone buzzed with passive-aggressive text messages from residents, and someone had already created a Facebook group called Survivors of Karen's Pool Patrol. But instead of retreating in shame, Karen doubled down with the strategic precision of a military campaign. She spent the entire night researching property law, HOA precedents, and what she discovered was surprisingly comprehensive noise ordinances. If the residents wanted to play hardball, Karen would show them what a real HOA enforcer looked like. The next morning, Karen emerged from her townhouse armed with a digital decibel meter and measuring tape and a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Her first target, Dave's apparently beloved morning routine of grilling breakfast sausages on his deck. "Good morning, Dave," she announced cheerfully, positioning herself exactly 18 inches from his property line. "I'm conducting a routine compliance audit." Dave, spatula in hand and wearing pajama pants covered in cartoon hamburgers, stared at her in disbelief. "Karen, it's 7 a.m. on a Wednesday." "Exactly," she replied, consulting her freshly printed documentation. According to City Ordinance 847.2, outdoor cooking equipment cannot exceed 65 decibels before 8 a.m. on weekdays. Your grill is currently producing. She held up the meter, 68.3 decibels. "It's a grill, Karen. They make noise when they cook food." Karen's smile could have powered a small appliance. "Not before 8 a.m. they don't. That'll be a $150 fine, payable within 14 business days." What Karen hadn't anticipated was Dave's response. Instead of sputtering indignation or meek compliance, he turned off his grill, walked to his shed, and returned with the loudest leaf blower known to suburban science. "Well then," Dave announced, yanking the starter cord with theatrical enthusiasm, "I guess it's time for some early morning yard work." The leaf blower roared to life with the approximate volume of a small aircraft, sending a hurricane of grass clippings, dust, and miscellaneous debris directly toward Karen's pristine white townhouse. Her decibel meter immediately maxed out, and she watched in horror as her carefully organized paperwork scattered like autumn leaves. "That's easily 90 decibels," she shrieked over the mechanical hurricane. "CANT, hear you," Dave shouted back with obvious glee. "Go to maintain my property values." Within minutes, other residents began emerging from their homes with their own noise-making devices. Mrs. Patel started her vacuum cleaner and rolled it onto her front porch. The Martinez family dragged out their ancient stereo system and cranked up what sounded like mariachi music played through a megaphone. Even elderly Mr. Kowalski contributed by enthusiastically practicing his trumpet, badly. Karen stood in the center of the acoustic maelstrom, her measuring devices useless, her authority crumbling, and her perfectly styled hair now resembling a tumbleweed caught in a tornado. But something remarkable happened. Instead of defeat, she felt a surge of pure, undiluted rage that clarified her thinking like nothing had in years. "Fine," she bellowed, though nobody could hear her over the cacophony. "If they do you want to play."